Hello, everybody, and welcome again to our Laws of the Soul webinar commentaries. This is the 10th day of January in the year 2014, and we are working on the Law of Repulse. We've already done quite a bit of work on the Law of Repulse stanzas, probably more than a year ago, and they can be found on the Makara site, makara.us. And now we're sort of working around those laws. We've looked at the way the laws of the soul are listed here and the correspondence between them. The law of repulse related directly to the law of sacrifice. The law of group progress related to the law of magnetic impulse. And the law of expansive response related to the law of service. There's sort of a 1, 2, 3 there, and they correspond to the 3 petals, tiers of petals of the egoic lotus, with the higher of these laws, the higher 3 of them, working within the spiritual triad particularly, and correlated with each one of them with a tier of petals in the egoic lotus. The law of repulse being correlated with the sacrifice petals, the law of group progress with the love petals, and the law of expansive response taking its place within the monastic aspect of the triad, correlated with the petals of knowledge. In other words, 3 laws correlated with 3 aspects of the spiritual triad, and then correlated further with the 3 tiers of petals in the egoic lotus, each one of which has a lower soul law, particularly correlated with it, the law of sacrifice with the sacrifice petals, law of magnetic impulse with the love petals, and law of service with the knowledge petals. And interesting how these laws begin, and they sort of work from the interior towards the exterior, from the higher tier of petals towards the lower tiers, and from the highest aspect of the spiritual triad towards the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad. Okay. Now we're on page 150. We're beginning Laws of the Soul webinar commentary number 18. So basically, I think it's going to say pretty much what I've just said. Maybe I didn't really need to summarize that, but these higher spiritual laws reflect themselves in the 3 lower spiritual laws. Notice they're all called spiritual. That which is of the soul is called spiritual, and yet the word refers mostly to that which is of the spiritual triad. Finding their way back into the lower consciousness via the egoic lotus and the antahkarana. Well, if we really look at this, I think we're going to see an interesting thing. This will be fellowship right there. Okay. I think we will see that there are paths which lead from the points, from the permanent atoms of the spiritual triad directly into the egoic lotus. Let's take a look at one of the earlier pictures of the egoic lotus. And yet also we might say that via the antahkarana, which connects, or antahkarana, which connects with the higher triad, there's another aspect of that antahkarana which is leading into the egoic lotus, and yet not so much into the petals as into the jewel in the lotus, but I suppose whatever finds its way into the jewel in the lotus finds its way into the petals as well. Right, okay, finding their way into the lower consciousness via the egoic lotus and the antahkarana. What I was talking about was how these spiritual laws find their way into the egoic lotus itself, largely via the direct contact between the permanent atoms and the petals of the egoic lotus, but also via that part of the antahkarana, which is not usually the one we consider, which connects the center of the egoic lotus with the monastic permanent atom. I guess about the details of these things and how they actually work in a hyperphysics manner, we'll learn when we are solar angels, or with man on the way to becoming such. But into the lower consciousness, let us say that from the petals themselves, we have a connection with the mental unit and with the entire personality, and from the antahkarana also with that same point around which the personality is constellated. The personality has a sense of separateness, a sense of individuality, and therefore needs that mental unit to reinforce that. When the mind nature develops, the sense of being a separate unit is enhanced. All right. This statement is the second basic postulate in connection with our study of the law of repulse. The first postulate being the earlier statement that unless there is the thread of light to act as a channel, that this law conveys, that which this law conveys will remain unknown and unrealized. That thread of light has to be antahkaranic. So let's call this postulate 1, requiring the antahkarana and its thread of light to bring through that which the law of repulse conveys. And we can say over here postulate 2, that these higher spiritual laws reflect themselves in the 3 lower spiritual laws and find their way into the lower consciousness via the egoic lotus and via the antahkarana. Okay. All these things seem like abstractions, but when they're actually working, our consciousness, our ability to know, to contact different dimensions, changes very greatly, expands, and becomes more subtle, or capable of contacting the subtler reaches. These 6 laws give us the key to the entire psychological problem of every human being. That's quite a statement, isn't it? And there is no condition which is not produced by the conscious or unconscious reaction of man to these basic influences, the natural and the spiritual laws. Well, I guess he's talking also about the natural laws, which are discussed more fully in a treatise on cosmic fire. These 6 laws give us the key to the entire psychological problem of every human being. I suppose that problem has largely to do with how to come in touch with this inner spiritual reality we call the soul, how to absorb the soul's energy in a constructive way so that the work of the outer man actually expresses the intentions of the soul, and all manner of difficulties that may arise as that accommodation between our personal elemental self and our higher egoic self, as that accommodation is gradually made. Many problems will arise. Of course, are these problems taken into consideration by present-day psychologists? Well, some. Maybe increasingly so, but so many do not know anything about it and consider the whole prospect of such a relation between ego and personality to be fanciful. If psychologists would accept the 3 basic laws of the universe, well, the law of synthesis, the law of attraction, the law of economy, and the 7 laws through which they express their influence. Now, I'm not sure whether he's really talking about the laws of the soul of the 7 systemic laws. You know, law of vibration, law of cohesion, law of death and disintegration. Is that what it's called? Systemic laws. Let's make sure here. I think it would be good to make sure. Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Law of cohesion. So let's see if there's a list of these so they can be read off. There they are. Disintegration, not death. Death comes to the 7th. Law of magnetic control. Law of fixation, law of love, law of sacrifice and death. Might as well put these in here, don't you think? The 7 laws through which they express their influence, plus, of course, the laws of the soul, which probably have a connection with these 7, which we could figure out. As a matter of fact, that's really what DK has us do. Quite a bit of the correlating work, as when the 10 Commandments and the various means of yoga and the Beatitudes and so forth are all correlated. In his book Esoteric Psychology, we have to learn how to do that, to find the natural links between these numbered laws. So the 3 basic laws of the universe, and those are pretty clear in our minds, at least their names are clear in our minds, and I'll just put them in here. Okay, right here. The laws of synthesis, law of attraction, law of economy, and the 7 laws which they express their influence, and these are systemic laws, and maybe the laws of the soul have to be added to that. They would arrive at the understanding of the human being far more rapidly than is now the case. Oh, he's going to repeat them. Okay, so the 3 major laws are, as has been stated elsewhere, the law of economy. That's the 3rd ray law, and it governs particularly the instinctual nature of man, deals with the tendencies of his lunar lords, the lunar elementals. Okay. The law of attraction, which governs the soul aspect in man and in all forms of life, from the atom to the solar system, but he has said elsewhere that the law of magnetic impulse is the interior nature of the law of attraction. And the law of synthesis, which governs man when he has arrived at the path of initiation, but which as yet means little in his development, let's say, for average man. I guess that we begin to understand life in synthetic wholes when we reach the path of initiation, and suddenly we grasp things simultaneously. Let's call it simultaneous grasp under the influence of Uranus. Why not spell that correctly? Simultaneous grasp under the influence of Uranus, whereas Saturn is often to be rightly considered the planet of sequentiality, Uranus the planet of simultaneity, seeing it all at once. Okay, he does go on to discuss these. There are then the 7 minor laws. They're sometimes called, instead of cosmic laws, they are called systemic laws, or laws of the solar system, which produce the evolutionary unfoldment of man, the person, and man, the soul. So not limited merely to the outer nature of man, but to the inner nature as well. And one wonders, are the cosmic laws related to man, the monad, and the 7 systemic laws, SYS, systemic, related to both man the soul and man the personality. All right, perhaps so. And these laws, as we just went through, the law of vibration, the atomic law of the solar system, notice, of the solar system, it operates on the atomic plane. The law of cohesion, an aspect of the law of attraction, maybe as the law of magnetic impulse is an interior aspect of the law of attraction, I suppose we would say, related to the monadic plane. The law of disintegration, related to the atomic plane. The law of magnetic control, governing the control of the personality by the spiritual nature, by the soul nature. And the spiritual nature, this could be called the spiritual triad, and it would seem that this law has much to do with control from the Buddhic plane, and control by the solar angels on the Buddhic plane of the personality nature, by the soul nature, just the way we had, well, the law of magnetic control from that point of view could be seen as related to the three higher soul laws, which are triadal in nature, but I think particularly control from the Buddhic plane. We do see that to build the soul nature into the personality is largely a question of building Buddhi into the personality, and the whole initiation process, at least our initiations, are a process of building Buddhi into the personality nature. Then the law of fixation, by means of this law, the mind controls and stabilizes. Well, we do create, so to speak, mental snapshots of our experience, and we segmentize the flow of experience. Maybe there is no such word as segmentize, but let's just say now there is. Okay. Then the law of love, law of fixation naturally would be related to the mental plane. The law of love, whereby the lower desire nature is transmuted, and we would say, so therefore this law will be related to aspiration, because aspiration is a definite method of transmutation, at least making the contents of the vehicle subject to higher energies which contribute to the transmutation, because it lifts them up vibrationally and I suppose makes it easier for these higher energies to impact that. And then the seventh law of sacrifice and death occurring in relation to the etheric physical plane. Normally when we think of death, we think of the physical body, but there are all manner of deaths, aren't there? I mean, the deaths of the various vehicles on the between lives and on the way to the refocusing of the consciousness, or the entirety of the soul and incarnation consciousness in the soul itself before its directed re-entry into the lower worlds. Okay. So those are the 7 subsidiary laws, and these 7 laws concern, it says, the form side of life, but also apparently the soul, because we're told, aren't we, that and they produce evolutionary unfoldment of man the person and man the soul, and we might say maybe through his vehicles, which are of the form side of life. All right. These 7 laws concern the form side of life, or even how the soul unfolds through form. And form relates to the cosmic physical plane. So we may be speaking of form in a larger sense. To these 10 laws must be added the 7 laws of the soul. So there we go. That is the 17 altogether here. The 7 laws of the soul, which we are here considering. So we have 3 plus 7 plus 7. It kind of, well, let's see. The 3 great constellations, and I suppose the 7 stars of the Great Bear and the 7 stars of the Little Bear. There are ways to correlate these numbers. These laws of the soul begin to play upon the man and produce his more rapid spiritual unfoldment after he has been subjected to the discipline of the probationary path, or the path of purification. So that's an important point. It's as if, let's say, the laws of the soul do not really come into effect until the path of probation is passed. And so, let's see, probationary disciples will respond to the laws of the soul, but not as effectively. How about spelling that? And as rapidly as those who are true disciples. So he's then ready to tread the final stages of the path. You wonder where he begins that. Does he begin that with the path of initiation, or does he begin that with accepted discipleship? So does this begin with, let's see, ADD, discipleship, accepted? No. It's been a while since I've used it. These 7 laws are the basis of all true psychological understanding, and when their influence is better grasped, man will arrive at real self-knowledge. There's something within us, something higher within us, which is attempting to express these laws. Sacrifice, magnetism, service, repulsion of that which cannot be truly integrated into the spiritual life, at least not yet. Group work and group progress, group initiation, and a gradual entry into the spiritual triad and into the larger impersonal worlds through the last 2 laws, beginning with it's called not magnetic response. It's called expansive response. It makes you think that it has some Jupiterian content to it. He will then be ready for the 4th initiation, which releases him from all further need for rebirth, though perhaps the laws of the soul on a higher turn of the spiral will still be active. But it's interesting that the functioning of these laws, but in general, the functioning of these laws leads to the 4th initiation. So if we fulfill them as we possibly can, learn about them, have them characterize our lives, it prepares us for that launching point we call the fourth initiation, which takes us then away from the need for further incarnation as a limited human being. I suppose the whole universe itself is an incarnation of the Absolute. So in a way, we're never going to escape incarnation, but we will escape what we as human beings conventionally call incarnation. This is the truth which underlies the Masonic teaching, which is given under the symbolism of the first 18 degrees, the number of which is 9. And preparing then for the conscious life of the soul, which begins at the 19th subplane. These can be divided into 4 groups of degrees. So we have the Entered Apprentice, that's the first degree, Fellowcraft second, followed by something from the York Rite, which we call the Mark Degree, although of late it's been incorporated in the Reformed Masonry into the standard procedure of degrees. The Mark Degree correlating with the third initiation. The Master Mason, which seems to embody fourth and fifth degrees together, followed by the HRA degree, which brings us at least to mastership, maybe beyond, and the group degrees 4 to 17 in the Scottish Rite. Then we're going to have an important 18th degree, which is important to Rosicrucianism, I believe. Without saying too much about it, these 17 degrees prepare the man to take the fourth or fundamental degree taken by the man who is the Master Mason. And I suppose this view of the fourth degree links it with our fourth initiation. Well, I wonder. It can only be taken when the Master is in possession of the true lost word. Well, maybe not. Maybe beyond. Maybe beyond the fourth, since the Master Mason degree does contain elements of the fourth degree. The Master is threatened by his 3 vehicles and basically killed. And this is the same as the 3 lower worlds rejecting the human being at the time of the fourth degree. They expel him, as DK tells us. They repudiate him. He is cast out so that he may be absorbed into a larger type of livingness altogether. But this fourth or fundamental degree, I want to see how he means this, because maybe it is going to be beyond the fourth initiation. It can only be taken when the Master is in possession of the true lost word. Now this is going to be either the word of the soul or a still higher word. He has risen from the dead, so this is in a way the preliminary resurrection, not the resurrection of the 7th degree. That's the true resurrection, which takes us all the way to the very top of the cosmic physical plane, to the logoic plane. But this is the resurrection connected with the, following the 4th degree, connected more with the 5th degree, on the way to the revelation, illumination revelation. He has been entered, passed, and raised, so that is going to be, that raising, a kind of resurrection, which is associated with the end of the 4th, beginning of the 5th degree, and now can be perfected, and maybe that's where the HRA enters in. What is the perfected man? Is it the initiate of the 5th degree as far as man per se is concerned? Because a master of the 5th degree is still a man. Whereas the Chohan, they are no longer men as are the masters, but having passed beyond that lesser stage can link themselves with the great council in the highest secret place. So we can now be perfected. I think what we think here is as a human being. Herein lies a great mystery. Well, yes, the whole thing is mysterious, and especially since mostly it should be discussed in its details within a Masonic lodge, where freedom of discussion is allowed. You know, this kind of trains us for the receipt of the mysteries. Only in certain circles can certain things be discussed. So the Masonic protocol is kind of a preliminary training for those higher states of initiation, where strict secrecy of those very powerful secrets, the Masonic secrets being a reflection of those, is practiced. So herein lies a great mystery. These 17 degrees lead to the first great step taken by the risen master. Okay, so taken by the initiate, of the 5th degree. Our subjective really, let's see, these 17 degrees relating to the first great step. Let's see, it's a step which takes us really into the full process of the second solar system, transcending that which humanity is when humanity is connected to the remnants of the previous solar system. Are subjectively related to the 17 laws we have been considering. Wow, now that's something that maybe we could do at some time. Maybe this is not the time, but we have 17 laws and 17 degrees. And I'd have to go back into my Scottish Rite to remember all the names of those degrees. You know, if you don't practice them, the names fall away. I used to be involved in the presentation of these degrees, and that was 30 years ago. But for those Masons who have some of the occult background, what the degree is in its presentation is rendered far more meaningful. The great majority of Masons are not yet schooled in the deeper meaning of the degrees through which they pass, but now that the AUM work is going on under the direction of Keith Bailey, I believe that there will be now a deepening of understanding of all these degrees. Not that AUM will necessarily resurrect all these 17 degrees. It's a big task to prepare a group for the passing through a particular degree. So that would be, I don't know how many lives' work. Maybe the day will come when the Scottish Rite will find the deeper meaning of the 4th through 17th degree, and that will take some blending as well with the necessary degrees found in the York Rite. So DK is giving us a big correlational task here, and I'm probably, I'm definitely not up to doing anything complete with it at this point, but it would be a great research paper for someone who could spend some months on it. There is a parallelism worth noting between the 18 laws, okay, the 3 major laws of the universe, cosmic laws, of economy, attraction, and synthesis, the 7 minor laws of the system, which we listed, and the 7 basic laws of the soul, plus what we might call the great law of deity itself, the law of God's synthetic purpose. Perhaps this is different from the cosmic law of synthesis because it has something to do with the particulars which are synthesized. The purpose is always a kind of a picture or a design of elements which have to be taken together and brought into a certain archetypal configuration in the lower worlds. So you do need not just the principle of synthesis, but the specificities of that which is being synthesized, the different levels which are to be synthesized. So is this kind of a, well, the 18th law. Now maybe it's going to correlate with the subplanes. Let's see. Yes, a correlation with the 18 subplanes through which man very gradually, life after life, makes his way. The 7 physical subplanes, 4 of which are etheric, the 7 astral or emotional desire subplanes, 2 of which are man is really to have nothing to do with, at least the matter shouldn't be built into his system, and the 4 lower mental subplanes. And then the 18 degrees of Masonry, from that of Entered Apprentice to that of the perfected initiate of the Rose Croix, a Rose Croix Degree, perfected initiate of the Rose Croix, the Rosy Cross, and the 18th degree. Well, that is a great research project, and I think if I ventured into it at this time, I don't know how many programs it would take and how much confusion it would cause. But I suppose they would be in order, and the last 3, the higher 3 subplanes, whereon we would have well, emotional idealism on the first, and imagination on the second, and some sort of clairvoyance on the third. I don't think it would be planetary clairvoyance. And then we would have to rise through the other degrees where we have words like planetary used, the other subplanes. He has here, yeah, that's correct, higher clairaudience, which corresponds to the clairaudience of the 5th. So this is on the 7th subplane of the mental plane, but he really doesn't give us anything, any law, or any faculty that is found on the 7th and 6th subplanes of the astral, or even, if you notice it, on the 7th and 6th subplanes of the dense physical. Then planetary psychometry, corresponding with psychometry of the 4th and the astral level. It's a psychometry of a greater scope, you know. It connects with the sense of touch, doesn't it? So you touch and you know, but in a larger planetary sense. Then the higher clairvoyance, which I assume takes a planetary takes a planetary dimension, and then discrimination, which relates to psychometry and planetary psychometry. Yeah. Well, there's one way you can correlate them by name, of course, imagination and discrimination, but there's another way. You could begin and you could say, well, spiritual telepathy correlates with emotional idealism. Response to group vibration with imagination gives us a sense of how we are to feel the quality and the contacts made within our groups through the imagination, and spiritual discernment with clairvoyance. You can do it that way as well. Okay, well, we always want to relate here to these capacities as they are found on page 188 in a treatise on cosmic fire, because he does relate back to them consistently. So, you know, I guess in a way he's saying that we have 18 subplanes here, but right now we are only given well, we're given, yeah, you see, if we go only to the causal level, we have 4, 5, and 5. We just have 14, 4 here of form, 5 and 5. 5 and 5 is 10, and 4 is 14. 3 are missing. So the 18th degree would have to do with the entry into the causal body, I suppose. Well, actually, the 18th degree, it would be more or less in a way the 19th degree that would take us actually into the 19th subplane. The 18th degree would take us right to the border land of the causal body, and it would synthesize all that has gone before, as 9 is the synthetic number of the third aspect. Well, can't one see a treatise? Matter of fact, I'm thinking, there comes the opportunity now for people in the Moria Federation to write their final thesis, their dissertation, their final project, offering some new insight, perhaps, to that which has already been given. And if they would make their way through cosmic fire, they would see that which the Tibetan leaves uncorrelated, awaiting for the correlators to come along and those who grasp the significance of the correlations to be made. Scattered throughout his books are so many projects awaiting to be undertaken. He's left a lot to do in the new esoteric schools, and I hope that we as faculty and the upcoming students are sharp enough to see these uncorrelated areas which need to be put together into a meaningful wholeness. I'm just awakening to that because just within the last couple of days I've been writing to the students about their synthetic opportunity at the end of their 5 years or 7 years of the Moria Federation, the synthetic opportunity to put much of the learning, or at least a significant part of the learning they've experienced, together into some new formulation, which is in a way certainly new for them and maybe new for others. So I'm stimulated here to think of future projects in the next centuries for those of us who fancy we will be connected with the new esoteric schools. The future projects in those schools that will add a great quota of light to that which man already understands. Because after all, these new esoteric schools have to be centers of illumination, is it not? Is it not so? So he's asking us to make then I'm tempted, that's why I'm hanging on here, a correlation. You kind of wonder, the degrees of Masonry, of course, you wonder whether they should be taken with, beginning with the cosmic laws, working from the bottom. For instance, the law of the law of economy, say, working one's way up, correlating with the Entered Apprentice degree, the law of attraction with the fellow craft, well, that certainly always works. The middle one always works. The law of synthesis with the Master Mason degree, and this is without the Mark degree interpolated there, going on to the Master. And then beginning with the fourth degree, start with the law of, how would we do that? Well, we have to decide whether we begin with the top degree or we begin with the bottom. We could, of course, we could begin with the law of the soul, law of sacrifice, and correlate it with the first degree, and the law of magnetic response with the second or fellowcraft degree, and then the law of It'll come to me here. Yes, the law of the soul. The law of service is the third. Can that correlate then with the third degree? Well, maybe one can find the reason, and the law of repulse then on with the fourth and so forth, rising up. You see, we can begin from the lower laws and work our way to the great cosmic laws, where the law of synthesis would be the highest in that respect, and correspond to the, well, are there, yes, there are 17 to the Rose, no, and the 18th degree would be the Rose Croix Degree. Well, you know, I have to leave it. Lots of things are flashing in my mind about possible correlations, but one cannot do everything here. This is a task for someone perhaps with Masonic, well, definitely with Masonic knowledge and knowledge of the laws of the soul and the cosmic laws, and knowledge of the vibratory potentials and the cities found on the various planes. This is something for them to undertake. Okay, and then there's a further correlation, the 18 centers of force with which the spiritual man has to work. So you can see here that there are 7 centers in the etheric body. I wonder if we should make this a little bigger. Perhaps do that. Yes, like this. So there are 7 centers in the etheric body. There are 7 centers in the etheric portion of the astral body, and 4 what we call centers in the on the highest level of the mental body. The spleen, interestingly enough, is here connected, and the ajna center is not mentioned. Somewhere it tells us about the ajna center being an evocation, but then so is the sacral center. But anyway, we do have 7 circles, and we do have the number 18, 7, 7 plus 4, 18, demonstrated on this chart. When you get into the nitty-gritty of the correlations, that's where we will have to be careful, because there are major centers and minor centers. And a major center, which is the ajna center, is left off, and a minor center we call the spleen is included. So the 18 centers of force with which the spiritual man has to work, the 7 centers in the etheric body, and, you know, those are not necessarily the centers which are listed, because the spleen is listed and the ajna is not. And that, and the ajna center is a major center after all, and the spleen is not. The 7 centers in the astral body, and we see these with the same story happening here. The spleen instead of the ajna center, and the 3, this is interesting, he calls them the 3 rows of petals in the egoic lotus, so he skips the 3 base of spine, sacral or gonads, and solar plexus. He skips these and goes straight to the 3 rows of petals, and then the jewel and the lotus. Well, at the heart of the flower of the soul, which makes the 18th center, so we say, notice that he skips the 3 major chakras on the 4th level of the higher mental, of the lower mental plane. So there's a jump there, and you know, there are various jumps that we're going to have to notice as we go along. We're leaving out, of course, the 1st and 2nd subplanes of the physical plane, the 1st and 2nd subplanes of the astral plane, counting from below upward, really the 7th and the 6th. We're leaving those out, and sometimes we do, in order to complete the number 18, we venture into the higher mental plane. Why he skips over these, I don't know. But, of course, if we really want to sum what's going on the higher mental plane, we're going to have to look for 3 higher capacities. The spiritual telepathy capacity, the response to group vibration capacity, the spiritual discernment capacity on subplanes 1, 2, and 3, and also, I suppose, well, I'm not sure here whether he will include the discrimination capacity, but he's pretty well left the development of the lower mental plane out of this picture of 18. And I suppose if we go to the perfected initiate of the Rose Croix, we will find it is much more suitable to have the jewel in the lotus as a correspondence. Although when we talk about the subplanes, we do have a mental subplane, and we do end with the fourth subplane, but that's interesting because the number 4 is the number of perfection, and he talks about the perfected initiate of the Rose Croix. The quality of perfection is found on the 4th level of the atomic plane. And then the laws, if we want to end with a cosmic law, we may have to use the higher mental plane. Higher mental plane may have to be used. And then some kind of final great law of deity, which he calls the law of God's synthetic purpose, which really should correlate with the center of synthesis within the egoic lotus, and that is the jewel in the lotus. So, this way madness lies. There's going to be a lot of correspondential finagling going on here to see how it actually does work. But I think just in the attempt to explain how it might work, whether or not it's absolutely accurate, I think that any student in one of the new esoteric schools would have a great mental intuitional workout which would yield a certain quantity of and quality of understanding. I don't think I think in the past I've kind of just read through this and said, oh yes, but really getting into it will certainly reveal the light. And you can see that I'm longing to enter into this correlational work, but I think sometimes we Aries people have to learn to let other people do things and let things remain undone rather than plunging into something simply because it can be done. But as you can see, there is not an exact sequential correspondence between these 4 as skips are made, especially when dealing with the centers of force. And, there is a sequentiality here in the 18 subplanes. We do not jump into the higher 3 subplanes here. But when we're dealing with these laws of the soul, it may be that we have to do some skipping, and we have to somehow, for the 3 higher laws, we have to maybe enter the egoic lotus. It's possible that they could be found correlating to subplanes on the lower mental plane, but, well, they certainly, can correlate to the lower degrees of Masonry, but depend on how you arrange them. Oh, well, I'm allowing the temptation to get a hold of me, so I just will go on. An understanding of these symbolic relations will do much to clarify the way of the soul in a body, and will constitute the basis of all true esoteric psychological study. Well, in the great science of relations, I sometimes think that of all sciences, it is the fundamental science, because although we have an indivisible unity, when we think of essence, we also have a great variety within this essential oneness. It's part of the subdivisibility of God through the emanatory process, which is not a real subdivisibility at all. It is an apparency. But in this apparency, with all of the numbered entities and combinations of entities, there will come a need to recreate the essential intended relation between them, an archetypal relation, which when completed will lead to the realization of an indivisible oneness. So this law of relations is what allows us, from a condition of limited consciousness, subject to the apparency of difference, to begin to recombine things and to see their fundamental connections and their similarities and how they fit with each other and are meant to combine under the archetype, which essentially is directing all things. Archetype and purpose fit very closely together, and if purpose is fulfilled, the archetype in the heavens will be reproduced in a reflective manner in the lower spheres. We are going to actually go on here. It is the next section, but I think we'll wait until the next program to do that. And so, just trying to review just a little bit here. He's talked about the 17, the 3, the 7, and the 7, which are 17 laws plus one strongly synthetic law of God's purpose, and he's correlated these with the planes and with the Masonic degrees leading up to the 18th degree, and with the chakras, the various chakras. Now, when you look at the map here, there are not yet 7 chakras upon the mental plane. The egoic petals, or the tiers of the egoic lotus, take the place of the chakras. And this is really interesting, because we see that there would have to be 4 major chakras, and we do have 4 factors on the higher mental plane. We have the bud and the jewel considered as one unit, then the sacrifice petals, love petals, and knowledge petals. And we'd have to correlate them with the chakras as they appear on the emotional and mental level. We have left out the emotional and physical level. We have left out the ajna center. How that correlation would work? Well, certainly the head center could be correlated with the central bud. But then would the sacrifice petals be correlated with the ajna center? Maybe. The heart petals with the or the petals of love with the heart center, of course. It's still super diaphragmatic, and the knowledge petals with the throat. So the question is, how actually do we really have 5 factors here, but we do not have so many chakras unless we start to combine some of the quite esoteric chakras, which are other than the 7. Sometimes they're talked about on the mental plane, or perhaps a certain monastic center between the heart and the throat center. But once we actually get into this kind of work, the interrelationships of the whole really begin to make sense to us, and we begin to see that how things are linked, everything to everything else, and that prepares us for the realization of the unity. Well, okay, I think what I'll do here, rather than meander, I'll start a new section, but let's just say that this will be the end of Laws of the Soul webinar commentaries number 18, page 153 of EP2, and beginning of Laws of the Soul webinar commentaries number 19, page 154. This, we're in the Law of Repulse, and of course it's going to be a little bit spotty because about, I don't know how many programs have already been done on the Law of Repulse stanzas, and I don't think that it's necessary to repeat them. It's just necessary to interpolate them, and when studying this part, when we get to the point of the stanzas, we just interpolate those stanzas. That would be the thing to do. Okay, friends, I'll come back in number 19 in just a little while, and we'll see you soon.